rooted for Will Smith my whole life. I root for this motherfucker, okay? And now I watch Emancipation just to see him get whooped.
Imagine someone who generated more than $10 billion at movie theaters, became the very first rapper to ever win a Grammy, and then completely destroyed 20 years of public goodwill in a single moment on live television, watched by the entire world. That's Will Smith. And honestly, that's nowhere near the strangest thing about his journey. This man was once among the most universally liked entertainers on the planet. These days, his name tends to pop up online alongside the word embarrassing. After that unforgettable Oscars incident, Big Willie thought it was the right moment to step back into the music world and remind everyone where he started. The concept seemed straightforward enough. The reality was anything but. Rather than a powerful return to form, what we got felt more like watching a relative attempt the worm at a family reunion. The hip-hop community wasn't buying it for even a second. People are treating Will's music comeback less like a new beginning and more like someone desperately trying to undo damage that's already been done. The same questions keep coming up everywhere you look. How did he go from rap trailblazer to one of Hollywood's biggest stars to begin with? Why did so many artists in the rap world spend years saying he was too soft for the culture? And how did the drama surrounding his marriage to Jada Pinkett end up doing more damage to his reputation than any diss record ever managed to? Then there's the question of why every attempt Will made to seem down to earth and relatable online somehow turned into fresh comedy content within minutes. And of course, nobody can avoid the biggest topic in the room, the Oscars moment that permanently changed how the world sees him. A lot of people believe that years of buried humiliation, public mockery, and silent pressure all finally boiled over that night in one very public explosion. When his latest album finally came out, things somehow found a way to get worse. Fans immediately began questioning whether major names like Jay-Z and Kendrick Lamar had quietly chosen to stay away from the project entirely.
Jay and I talked to Kendrick, and I was like, "Hey, I wanna get back in music. What's the advice?" Jay said, "Don't fake your story. You gotta say what's true for you. Be true to your story. Tell your story." And that's where I got the based on a true story from Jay. And Kendrick, he paused. He said, "Man, just say that you always been scared to say."
Let's take it back to the 1980s, when Will was still coming up in Philadelphia, laying the foundation for what would become the Fresh Prince character from scratch.
I've been Prince for years and years, but about 2 years ago, the DJs in the street started scratching, "Fresh, fresh, this is fresh." Everything was fresh, so I added the Fresh Prince onto my name.
He was building everything alongside his partner, DJ Jazzy Jeff. Almost overnight, he became one of the most recognizable young faces in rap. The guy hadn't even graduated yet when his early hit, Girls Ain't Nothing But Trouble, was already blasting out of car speakers everywhere you went. What separated Will from most rappers at the time was the image he chose to project: clean, lighthearted, and suitable for anyone regardless of age. No profanity, no tough guy posturing, just genuine energy and natural charm. That formula got him noticed quickly. As gangster rap kept pushing into darker territory month after month, Will carved out a comfortable spot in the mainstream lane that radio stations and television networks were actively looking for. It wasn't long before DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince were performing alongside legendary acts like Run DMC and Public Enemy. Then 1989 changed everything. Will made history by becoming the first rapper to ever take home a Grammy, earning it for Parents Just Don't Understand. But even in that moment of triumph, the complaints were already starting. To a large portion of hip-hop followers, that award only went to Will because he was easy to market to everyone. Meanwhile, the records actually shifting the culture were being overlooked. NWA had just released Straight Outta Compton, and Public Enemy was putting out politically charged music that hit with real force. To the skeptics, handing Will that Grammy felt like the industry choosing safe over substance. None of that criticism slowed his momentum even slightly. After reckless spending left him buried under millions in tax debt, Will landed the kind of opportunity that completely redirects a person's entire life. The starring role on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. The show exploded immediately. Within a matter of months, Will had gone from rapper to full-on Hollywood name. By the middle of the 1990s, he was inescapable. Bad Boys, Men in Black, Independence Day, and later I Am Legend. Every major studio wanted him attached to their projects because his name alone practically guaranteed enormous returns at the box office. Whether people respected that Grammy or not, there was no debating that Will Smith had become a global phenomenon. But underneath all the wealth and recognition, one label kept following him around like something he simply couldn't shake: soft. Through the 1990s, hip-hop went through a complete transformation. The culture began placing far more value on realness, toughness, and honest storytelling than on polished crowd-pleasing hits. Biggie and Tupac rose to icon status because listeners felt a genuine connection to them in a way Will's squeaky clean image could never replicate. Will kept releasing crowd-friendly records like Miami and Getting Jiggy With It, but to the purists of rap, his music was starting to feel manufactured compared to what was coming out of the streets. The distance between Will and the newer generation kept growing, and by the early 2000s, most people had already mentally retired his rap career. Then Eminem arrived and flipped the entire genre on its head. He was everything Will Smith was not, in every way that counted: provocative, unpredictable, offensive, and completely immune to anything resembling a family-friendly reputation.
I made a commitment a long time ago to my grandmother, the type of person I was going to be, the type of music I was going to make, the type of movies I was going to make. I made a commitment to my grandmother.
In The Real Slim Shady, Eminem took a direct aim, essentially pointing out that while Will Smith managed to move records without dropping a single curse word, he himself couldn't. That one line became instantly iconic and quietly embarrassed Will in a way that stung, mostly because absolutely everyone kept repeating it everywhere. At the same time, Will's music career was visibly losing its footing. His 2002 album Born to Reign performed significantly worse than anything he had put out before. He still ruled the movie world, but music listeners were gradually tuning him out, and those jokes about him being soft were clearly eating away at him beneath the surface year after year. In 2005, Will finally decided to fire back at Eminem with a track called Mr. Nice Guy, attempting to highlight his own achievements and pretend none of it bothered him. The problem was that choosing to respond at all pretty much confirmed that Eminem had landed somewhere painful. Years down the line, during a 2022 interview, Will openly admitted that being labeled soft had genuinely gotten under his skin. He even brought up a memory of his grandmother writing something in his rap notebook, telling him that truly smart people never need foul language to get their point across. That one lesson ended up shaping his entire public persona from the very beginning. Even DJ Jazzy Jeff has acknowledged that while crowds would go absolutely wild for him, they would sometimes turn on Will the moment he stepped out, because hardcore rap followers never truly embraced the Fresh Prince image. No matter how many blockbusters he headlined worldwide, that deep need for respect within hip-hop never fully disappeared, and things only became more complicated once his personal life started playing out in front of the entire world. Will married actress Jada Pinkett in 1997, and for a long stretch, they appeared to be the gold standard of Hollywood relationships. But there was always one particular figure casting a long shadow over everything: Tupac Shakur. Jada and Tupac shared an incredibly intense bond that stretched all the way back to their time together at the Baltimore School of the Arts. She was closely tied to his creative world and even appeared in some of his early work. Jada is reportedly among the inspirations woven into the iconic California Love video. Their relationship became one of the most discussed connections in all of hip-hop history. What made the situation harder for Will was how freely and openly Jada continued to speak about Tupac publicly over the years. A large portion of fans began feeling like Will was permanently positioned in a silent rivalry against someone who was no longer even alive. Long after Tupac had passed, reports surfaced that Jada had contributed money toward his release when he was locked up at Rikers Island. At one point, Pac allegedly even asked her to marry him, which only handed the internet more material to use against Will later on, even though she never said yes. Tupac made his feelings about Jada unmistakably clear on the record. He once described her as his heart, someone who would remain close to him for the rest of his life, and someone who could ask him for absolutely anything and receive it without question. That single statement caused people to view their entire connection through a completely different lens, because it carried a weight that went far beyond what most people would consider a typical friendship.
Never open up to interact with Pac, you know, and because we had a little bit of a thing, right? You know, they grew up together and, you know, they loved each other, but they never had that, you know, they never had a relationship. That was a huge regret of mine. I just I couldn't handle it. You know, I was the soft rapper from Philly, and he was Pac.
Right.
Now I was deeply insecure, and just I wasn't man enough to handle that relationship.
But before anything between them could develop further, everything changed in the worst possible way. Just a single year after the proposal, Tupac was shot and killed in Las Vegas, sending shockwaves through the entire hip-hop world. His death hit Jada deeply as well. Years after the fact, she opened up about a serious falling out the two of them had shortly before he was gone, and how she never got the opportunity to make things right between them. That unresolved guilt clearly stayed with her long after, and truthfully, the whole dynamic only continued, making Will appear lesser as the years passed. Being in a relationship with someone whose heart is still emotionally anchored to a legend is a battle with no realistic path to victory, because legends don't age, don't make mistakes, and never let anyone down again. In his 2021 memoir, Will came right out and admitted he carried jealousy toward Tupac and felt genuinely threatened by who he was. He wrote that during the early stretch of his relationship with Jada, the connection between her and Pac consumed his thoughts in a painful way. Even without any physical relationship between them, the depth of what they shared was something people recognized as extraordinary. Will also admitted that Tupac's fearless spirit and willingness to stand for something made him feel inadequate by comparison. For someone operating at Will's level of fame and success, to put that in writing for the world to read takes a particular kind of raw honesty. Will also disclosed that every time he found himself in the same space as Tupac, he essentially shut down and couldn't manage even basic conversation. He described how the way Jada felt about Pac made any real friendship between the two men impossible, because he simply wasn't emotionally equipped to handle it at that point in his life. For certain people, that level of openness made Will feel more relatable and genuinely human. But among rap fans scrolling online, it only poured more fuel onto the soft narrative he had spent the better part of his career trying to escape. Things became considerably more uncomfortable once Jada Pinkett Smith launched Red Table Talk in 2018. The entire premise of the show was built around unfiltered honesty and open conversation, but a number of those discussions ended up feeling less like healing and more like watching Will get quietly embarrassed in front of a live audience.
You and I were going through a very difficult time.
Yeah.
And we decided...
I was done with your ass.
Yeah, you kicked me to the curb.
I was done with you.
Yeah.
Marriages have that, though. Marriages have that.
Yeah, we basically, we broke up.
And then what did you do, Jada?
Well, you know, I think from there, you know, as time went on, I got into a different kind of entanglement with August.
An entanglement?
Yes. Yes.
A relationship.
Yes, it was a relationship.
For a long stretch, the two of them had managed to keep the details of the relationship tucked away from public view. Then suddenly, every intimate detail of their personal struggles was being unwrapped and laid out in front of a massive audience. And then, the most explosive revelation of all landed. During one episode that spread across every corner of the internet, Jada openly admitted to having been romantically involved with singer August Alsina during a particularly difficult period in their marriage. She referred to it as an entanglement, and the internet proceeded to completely detonate. Memes flooded every platform, jokes multiplied by the hour, and Will Smith became the subject of relentless ridicule across social media around the clock following that moment. The situation got considerably more tangled when August Alsina publicly claimed that Will had actually been aware of the relationship the entire time and had reportedly given it his approval while the two were separated. Whether people chose to believe that version of events or not was almost beside the point, because the reputational damage had already been done before anyone could slow it down. Then August joined forces with Rick Ross on a track literally named after the whole controversy, titled Entanglements, and the lyrics sent people into a frenzy online. One particular line suggested that having someone leaning on him had him seriously questioning his own self-control. That was a genuinely low blow. Rather than helping settle things down, Will's subsequent appearance on Red Table Talk looked like watching a man being dragged across broken glass on live television while trying to maintain composure. Viewers kept pointing out that he looked completely beaten down and humiliated, while somehow still attempting to keep a smile on his face throughout. Even Joe Budden stepped in publicly and argued that Jada continuously bringing Tupac into conversations was doing real damage to the foundation of their relationship. The internet grabbed hold of the entire situation and converted it into one extended punchline. And unfortunately for Will, he was the one standing at the center of that joke virtually every single time. There is something uniquely painful about watching a person transform into a recurring meme in real time. And that is exactly what the world witnessed happening to him.
Started to develop, someone put in the prompt of Will Smith eating spaghetti.
Yeah,
so that was
not?
like, yeah, right. Yeah. So just a random thing. So that became the test of the evolution of AI video.
Yeah.
Is every couple of months they do a new prompt of Will Smith eating spaghetti. And the latest one is the first one that's absolutely perfect and photo real.
It's mad.
Yeah.
I was watching it earlier and I was like, I can't believe that's not you.
Yep. I'm still eating the spaghetti in 2020.
He wasn't growing into someone the culture would eventually look back on with reverence. He was slowly becoming something people scrolled past just to laugh at. Then the moment arrived that reset every single thing. At the 2022 Academy Awards, Chris Rock stepped up to the microphone and cracked a joke referencing Jada's shaved head while the cameras rolled in the entire ceremony. In the very first seconds, Will appeared to be taking it in stride, just like everyone else in the building. Then something visibly shifted inside him, and he walked directly onto that stage and struck Chris Rock across the face on live broadcast in front of a global audience. The entire room went completely still. Everyone watching from home sat frozen, unable to fully register what had just played out in front of them. One of the most recognizable and celebrated actors on the entire planet had just publicly unraveled at the single most prestigious event in the entertainment industry. The footage exploded across every platform almost immediately, and within minutes, the internet had gone into a complete frenzy. But here is where things took the most unexpected turn. That slap did absolutely nothing to silence the years of criticism about him being soft. In many ways, it only poured more problems on top of the existing ones. A large number of people pointed out that he'd been laughing at the joke himself, right up until he caught Jada's expression. Others described him as looking emotionally fractured, erratic, and visibly crushed under the accumulated weight of years' worth of public embarrassment. Regardless of which interpretation anyone chose to believe, his public image absorbed a wound that evening that has shown no real signs of healing since. And then, somehow, in the middle of all that wreckage, Will concluded that the timing was ideal to resurrect his music career. In 2024, he announced, based on a true story, his first album release in more than 20 years. Will made promises that this project would go somewhere far more vulnerable and personal than anything he had previously put out. Rather than chasing radio-friendly hits, he claimed he was finally prepared to lay himself completely bare and address the most painful chapters of his life through music. He even mentioned having sat down and consulted with respected heavyweights like Jay-Z and Kendrick Lamar during the creative process. Fans noticed something immediately, though. Despite being named as part of the conversation, neither of them showed up anywhere on the actual finished record. That absence alone triggered an entire wave of jokes across social media, suggesting that even the most respected figures in hip-hop were deliberately maintaining a safe distance from whatever this comeback was supposed to be. When the album eventually dropped, Will brought in collaborators including Big Sean, Joyner Lucas, Tiana Major 9, and even the Sunday Service Choir associated with Kanye West. But none of those additions were enough to save the project from what was coming. Critics took the album apart piece by piece, and listeners barely engaged with it in any meaningful numbers. The streaming figures were genuinely difficult to look at. Based on a true story, ended up becoming the first Will Smith album in his entire career to fail completely in commercial terms.
Will Smith is how old?
57.
The stimulus plan that you naming is not working today for 50-however-year-old Will Smith. I don't think this is a bad song. But we can't pump this up like this is about to do something.
Back in his prime, his records were moving millions of copies and stacking platinum certifications. This time around, people online were cracking jokes that the album went triple wood instead of platinum. That's about as brutal a dismissal as it gets. A massive part of why the project got ignored is because the public felt completely saturated with Will Smith content. Between the Red Table episodes, the Oscars incident, the heavy emotional interviews, and the endless stream of viral moments, people felt like they had been given far more access to his personal life than they ever asked for. Rather than showing up ready to support a comeback, a large chunk of the audience just seemed worn out by his entire existence in the spotlight. Despite all the ridicule he keeps collecting online, Will continues pressing forward with his return to music regardless. Clips from his promotional appearances keep spreading across the internet, with critics saying he comes across like someone completely out of touch, trying to perform a version of rap that doesn't belong to him. Even his newer release, Pretty Girls, took a serious beating, with one critic describing it as an uncomfortable plea for relevance. That's a genuinely painful thing to have written about your work in public. At this stage, opinions on Will are completely divided. One side still holds genuine appreciation for everything he constructed across music, television, and film over several decades. The other side looks at his rap return and sees someone going through a very public identity crisis being broadcast in high definition to millions of people simultaneously. Regardless of where anyone stands, one conclusion is impossible to argue against. Watching Will Smith's reputation unravel has been one of the most jarring things to witness in entertainment, and nobody can say with any real confidence whether he still has the ability to bring the culture back around to his corner. Maybe the actual issue was never really about him being too soft for the genre. Maybe the deeper problem is that he spent the better part of 4 decades constantly reshaping himself into whatever any given audience seemed to want from him. And after all that shape-shifting, nobody can quite pin down who he genuinely is at his core anymore, possibly including himself. If you stuck around through the whole thing, go ahead and hit that like button listen, subscribe, and pass the video along. Drop something in the comments and let me know what you actually think. Does Will Smith still have a real chance at earning hip-hop's respect back, or did that door close permanently the moment his palm met Chris Rock's face? See you in the next one.